If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Friday, April the 25th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's producing the Come On With It edition of the program. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So one thing that is for certain is that a senior hockey team from this province will be in the Allen Cup final this coming Sunday, because Clarenville and St. John's, the Caps, they play each other in the semi at 5 Island time. Hopefully one is successful and brings home one of the most prestigious trophies in the hockey world. Okay, Softball Hall of Fame inductees. Meant to do this a few days ago when they were actually announced. So coming up on Saturday, May 31st out of Glendenning, going to be the provincial awards and the 2025 Softball NL Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Going into the hall, Jerry Bruce as a builder, Mark Dwyer as an athlete and builder, Brian Fleming as an athlete, Bill Nixon, athlete, Ray O'Brien, builder, George Pomeroy as an athlete, Donnie Roach, athlete, Paul Toomey, a builder, and Ray Withers as an athlete. He'll be inducted posthumously. Then, of course, we got the awards, and there's going to be some different teams recognized and players. The Galway Hitmen, the 2024 Men's Canadian Champions, they will be acknowledged. The Monroe Mariners, the 2024 U23 Men's Canadian Champions, also on the docket, or on the list. Ryan Boland, Jason Hill, and John Hill, all retiring from the men's national team. They will also be given the nod in the ceremony. Congratulations to all hands. And hearty congratulations to the Coastal Wave Elite All-Star Cheer Team. So this is an all-abilities cheer team. They won the right to represent the country at the World Championships and now world champions. So Pulse from Coastal Wave Elite are the world champions in all abilities cheer. Fantastic stuff. Great for them. All right, what do we got here? Okay. So every now and then there's one of those stories that just sticks in your mind, whether it be because it's unique or irregular or it's just sort of bizarre. The stealing of the plaques in the Amelia Earhart statue in Harbour Grace is exactly that for me. I don't know why it kind of dominated my thoughts yesterday afternoon, but then I went from that, and hopefully when the town of Harbour Grace announces the reward, they say it's going to be substantial, hopefully that leads to the recovery of the statue and to arrest whoever took it. But it led me to think about the rich aviation history in this province and maybe an opportunity that we've failed to latch on in full. Aviation buffs are everywhere in this world, and if they really fully understood the prominent history of aviation in Newfoundland and Labrador, maybe, just maybe, we could create some massive event around it. I looked around. There are big aviation-related festivals in the world that are extremely popular. Just think about it. We had a really important role in developing long-distance air travel. Of course we did. So it became a really popular taking-off point for aviation pioneers attempting to cross the Atlantic. Of course, there's a few clear examples. Amelia Earhart and her 2 record-setting flights from this province. Then you go to 1913, the month of April. The London Daily Mail offered a £10,000 prize for the first non-stop transatlantic flight between Great Britain and any point in Canada, the United States, or Newfoundland. Of course, Newfoundland was chosen for a variety of reasons, proximity being number one. Now, there was no successful flight at that point. Then they paused the contest for the war. But back in 2019, 4 teams came to Harbour Grace to do exactly that. And of course, Alcock and Brown, some 16 hours after takeoff, landed nose first in a bog in Galway. And then we've been the refueling stop for some of the circumnavigation flights. There's a lot to latch onto here. Maybe, just maybe, there could be some sort of uber successful festival because the history is there. Add in Gander, XYZ. All right, let's keep going. So I wasn't anticipating there'd be much to the conversation surrounding interprovincial trade and the relationship between New Brunswick and Newfoundland and Labrador. So we have signed a memorandum of understanding to further explore interprovincial trade. There will indeed remain a bunch of exemptions in place. So the Premier said yesterday, pointing to minimum processing requirements in the fishery, labour agreements connected with hydroelectricity, and of course the Atlantic Accord. Then they talked about the transport of oil from this province to be refined in New Brunswick. Okay. So we'll see how far this gets. I'm not all that optimistic about interprovincial trade here in this country. Provinces are going to still stake claim to some really important things like labour agreements, protection of jobs. So we might see some move, but not what people thought could be in the offing. Let's talk about oil for a second. All right. Pipelines have become a huge part of the conversation here. So let's just get into some of the numbers. There's an estimated 840,000 kilometres of transmission gathering and distribution pipelines, including 117,000 kilometres of large diameter transmission lines for oil. But the pipeline issue is massive on the campaign trail. So there's lots of pipelines, period, in the country. And curiously, we're right around the 1-year anniversary of the twinning of the Trans Mountain Pipeline to come online. So what's being offered by the various leaders doesn't come with a whole lot of detail. And detail is important. Now, also to add to the conversation, the Trans Mountain was not stopped by the government, it was stopped by the courts. There was a court challenge by First Nations and the province of British Columbia, and back to the drawing board. Eventually, of course, as we all know, the government bought the pipeline to the tune of $34 billion. So whoever's elected next to lead the country will have to decide whether or not we're going to try and sell it. At this moment in time, experts in the field think that you probably only get about half of the $34 billion back. Or we keep it, we keep operating it, hopefully it becomes more attractive. Then it's the concept of building new pipelines. Okay, so is the suggestion that regardless of where a province stands on having a pipeline across their boundaries will be forced through? Can't see that being the case. I mean, the courts have been pretty clear on that stuff. And then it's the concept of return on investment. I have no earthly idea when we reach what people refer to as peak oil. And then they talk about reliance on the United States. And there's some 4.2 or 4.3 million barrels of oil distributed into the United States to be refined in that country. If you look down the road with realistically how long it takes to get something approved, and that is a big bugaboo for many people, is timelines regarding regulatory approvals. Then, and again, I don't know what peak oil is, are we saying that the investment, would it be the government building pipelines? Would it be trying to attract private investment to build a pipeline? Because let's look at it. Return on investment in the pipeline world has got to be over the course of decades. If it costs, let's just pick a round number, $30 billion for a pipeline to the size and the scope and the scale of twinning the Trans Mountain Pipeline, is there actually a business model there, or is this just a political tool? Oil is important in this province. We know it to be true regarding total revenues afforded to the provincial government, whether it be in the form of royalties or the tax base and the jobs created. We know it's important in Alberta. We know it's important in Saskatchewan. And yes, the refineries in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. But the companies also hold a big linchpin here for what they are going to do with their own oil. So will they want to ship it to Irving's in Nova Scotia? Maybe. Absolutely, maybe. Is the private sector going to spend $30 billion on a pipeline, hoping that over the course of 30 years, there is no decrease in production, no decrease in the appetite for oil from Canada? Look, we do indeed produce a lot of oil, and it has been the backbone of some provincial economies. If you look at it in Alberta, some 23% of their GDP. On the national scale, which is where I get a little bewildered about how important the conversation has become, because for Canada, it's about 3.5% of GDP. But it is a key focus on the national campaign trail. So your thoughts and what the role of the provinces is, the role of the provincial government, and yes, the role of the companies that are actually producing the oil. So it gets huge traction, and I understand why, because we talk about ourselves as a natural resource-rich country, and we are. We absolutely are. And the unleashing of our natural resources is probably a little bit more complicated than simply saying you're going to do it. But anyway, you want to take it on, because all parties are talking about natural resources because they have to, because it's important, right? Right. All right, what do I got here? Oh, wanted to put this out there for the folks who are involved with the Ocean Ranger Legacy Foundation. Important work they're doing, and we understand the tragedy that was the Ocean Ranger and the 84 lost. So they talk about things like repatriating artifacts that are currently being stored and displayed in Ottawa to bring them back to the province. So all hands are invited to the very first annual general meeting for the Ocean Ranger Legacy Foundation membership. It's going to be held at the Marine Institute up on Ridge Road, of course, Hampton Hall, Tuesday, April 29th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Parking is free. So they do important work. I told them I'd give a shout out for the AGM, so there you go. All right, and a couple of quick ones. Some of the things that were once really popular conversations, and as someone asked me to put it back out there this morning, and I will. It's the onshore wind proposals. Now, the world of green hydrogen continues to grow, but nowhere near the pace that was anticipated as short as 4 years ago. Seemingly, the projects have stalled here in the province. Maybe not out for Come By Chance and Argentia, and those are kind of a little bit of different beasts because they're talking about domestic consumption, domestic usage. So whether or not we're going to see any of them come to light, I don't know. But Everwind in Nova Scotia, interestingly enough, they've got now approval for a 40% tax break from the federal government, even though that province still has a firm reliance on coal and coke-fired generation. So they're apparently going to get the maximum 40%. If that's the case, then if and when there's the ability to raise the capital and to build these projects, you can only assume, given the renewable energy in this province and the percentage of, that these companies will be eligible for that 40%. But that does not mean that it's going to get built. So someone wanted me to put it out there because it's important to them. And I think they actually live out in the Port-au-Port Peninsula. So obviously, if you live close by where these projects are proposed, then it's a big deal. All right. I want to put the issue of the Auditor General's report on personal care homes out there. The caveat. Not every home is a problem. Not every staffer is a problem. But to not identify and to speak to the issues revealed by the Auditor General's report would be also a bit of a silly sidestep. Okay, there's good homes out there. There's great staff out there, no question. But for the benefit of the personal care home, I'll call it industry, is to fully acknowledge, and for the provincial government, whether it be a better relationship and understanding between the Department of Health and Community Services and NL Health Services and the industry. So I think when we talk about thousands of residents and then all of their families, we need to ensure that they have the best and healthiest, most dignified setting in a care home. So updating the operational standards is the lowest hanging fruit, as they say. It hasn't been done since 2007. There's some draft form sitting on somebody's desk in the Confederation building as long ago as 2022. Let's do that. And for care homes to be able to put their best foot forward and to ensure the general public that they have your best interests at heart. They do all they can for the best training for their staff to reduce any of the number of incidents regarding improper administration of medication and or any form of abuse and issues regarding non-compliance. Let's make it a public disclosure. Let's create a database where when inspections are done and issues are identified, they're reported publicly, and then status updates. Because as one of the personal care homeowners pointed out, and rightfully so, non-compliance feels like something really drastic has happened in the home, when it might not be that case. It might be an issue with a door trim, all the way down to improper administration of medication and or food or whatever the case may be. So let's put it out there. So the best homes will rise to the top. Those who are not as great at this moment of time in delivering the optimal experience for the residents, they'll up their game. So let's put that back out there for the good or the bad in that world. Let's do it. And yesterday was the ribbon cutting ceremony at the province's new mental health and addictions facility over on the Health Sciences Complex. I was invited to take a tour. I didn't have time, but I think I'm going to try to organize one here in the near future. Not just to get a look at the surroundings, the bricks and mortar, which of course is part and parcel with your recovery and or your treatment, but to ask questions of the program professionals. Exactly what will be different. Yes, it's important to know that people will have their own individual room, and that makes a lot of sense to me, and how important that would be. But, to get a better understanding about how this is going to change the delivery in mental health and or addiction treatment. People are worried about, fewer beds than were in the Waterford. I'm not sure what that measurement really means. Talk about more community services being out in the community, closer to where you live. But anything in that vein, you know me, we're more than happy to talk about that because it is extremely important. All right, a couple more quickies before we get to you. Oh, anything in education. Kids are going back to school on Monday for the home stretch, so obviously that's a big deal. Small municipalities in the province and the whole conversation regarding civic addresses. It's been kicked around for a long time, and I think for first responders, it's something that we need to tackle. But it's not in just that world. This is a strange story coming from Burlington. And if Mayor Rudy Norman is listening, would like to chime in to help us get a better understanding of what they're facing regarding Canada Post. So in rural Canada, for the vast majority of rural Canada, the only way they get stuff delivered is by Canada Post, unlike many of the bigger urban centres in the country. So apparently they've changed the approach to how you're supposed to address your package or parcel or letter to someone who's in Burlington. So, okay, instead of just, let's see here, some 300 residents in the town use a post office box. They have packages delivered to a box or house. He says, this Mayor Norman, the new mandate changed existing box numbers, causing even more confusion within the community. So now, instead of box 12, really, you're box 85, site 3, module 6. How and why and where are those changes required? So, Mayor Norman, if you'd like to chime in as to your communications back and forth with Canada Post, as to why all of a sudden something had to be much more difficult than probably it needs to be, we can take it on. All right. So, federal election, we're going to the polls on Monday, even though 7+ million Canadians have already voted. And it does beg the question, do party platforms even matter anymore? Are they relevant? A costed platform that would be, as opposed to utterings on the campaign hustings. So apparently it doesn't matter to a ton of people in this country, and it has been a struggle to try to discern what's real, what's not, what's accurate, what's false. It's been a handful, and there is plenty of bogus stuff floating around on all kinds of candidates, all kinds of leaders, and all parties. It's hugely problematic. I can't imagine what kind of person takes it upon themselves to knowingly and purposefully plant seeds that they know in their heart is absolute nonsense, but they do it anyway. It's not helping. It's not helping any party. It's not helping any individual politician. It's certainly not helping the electorate, but let's take it on. I've got emails about the polls are rigged and the election is rigged, and it's not good. All right. And of course, who the leader is has long been important, of course, even though we don't, unless you have one of the leaders running in your federal riding. We don't vote for the leader. But now, seemingly more than ever, maybe just because we're in the throes of the election, I feel this way, but looks like people are voting for the leader. And that's how they're evaluating, not the candidate in their own riding, is casting their vote solely on who the leader of the party is. Is it me, or is that a common sentiment across the country that it really feels like we're voting for the leader and nothing but? And the issue regarding the future for the NDP. Look, I'm not going to look down my nose at the NDP, and many people regard the NDP as the social consciousness party inside of Parliament. But they're in dire straits. Are people not going to vote for the NDP because they want to put that vote on that similar side of the political spectrum and just vote for the Liberals just cause? And the Conservative base has not waned. Even though the polls look like it's going to be an absolute dogfight, this, like many elections in the past, will absolutely be decided on which party does a better job of getting their vote out. Because the Conservatives were way out in front and the Liberals caught up, and then the Liberals took the lead, even though I don't know what veracity people want to put in the polls. But it looks like it is super tight. Whether that means another minority parliament is in the offing, I don't know. But the party that does the best job getting their voters to the polling stations on Monday, that party's going to win. It's long been the case, but now when it looks so super close, and it looks like two parties are going to harvest the vast majority of votes in this country, we can take it on. You know what has not been discussed on this particular campaign? And the last go around, and you talk about democratic reform and those types of things, and first past the post and all that stuff, is the Senate. It used to be Canadians were really concerned with the Senate, and the Senate's not going anywhere. Back when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister, and I think it was in 2014, he went to the Supreme Court of Canada looking for clarity on what the future of what the future of the Senate would look like. The court's answer made it look pretty clear. It made the process look nearly impossible. Here's what the court said. Even if we talk about modest reforms for the Senate, just even something as fundamental as term limits on senators, it requires to open up the Constitution, which people are loath to do. It would have to be amended, have to be approved by both houses of Parliament, and at least 7 provinces representing 50% of the country's population. Okay? Abolishing the Senate, the court said it would require nothing less than unanimous approval by all 10 provinces and the federal parliament. That's only after amendments were made to the Constitution. So the Senate used to be a very popular conversation. It's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit, but I just thought I'd put that out there. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address openline@VOCM.com. When we come back, let's have a great show to wrap up the week. That means we're speaking with you on a topic of your choosing. Don't go away. Welcome back. And as reminded by a listener via email, today is Anzac Day. It's commemorating the 110th anniversary of the Anzac landing at Gallipoli. And, of course, that includes the important role played by the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. And, of course, it commemorates the losses of soldiers representing Australia and New Zealand. And, of course, we were part of that as well. Not only the Gallipoli campaign, but also Beaumont Hamel alongside the Aussies and the Kiwis. So today is Anzac Day. Let's go to line number 1. Second one to the Executive Director at the Newfoundland Aquaculture Industry Association. That's Keith Sullivan. Keith, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning to you, Paddy.
Good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Yep, absolutely. Interesting times for everybody here in the province, Canada. Certainly 2 big weeks coming up for us. Obviously, the federal election, and we'll have a new premier, I guess, the following week. So obviously a time to kind of elevate all of the important issues for the people here, and I think aquaculture is certainly one that fits in that category. And even as recently as yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with Premier Fury, discuss where we are, continue to discuss the opportunities in aquaculture, and certainly some of the things that we're all looking for from the federal candidates or whoever's successful in forming government when the votes are counted on Monday and we wake up Tuesday and see what we have. So some of those include like the marine Atlantic and ensuring that we have a good environment for growing the industry in the province.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when we spoke with Jeff Lauder at the Association of Seafood Producers, and when that call was over, your email came in. Was there anything inside that conversation that prompted you to want to come on this morning?
Well, firstly, no, I was unrelated. I wasn't able to listen to your program yesterday, so no, I wasn't aware of that. So if he was talking about that, I mean, obviously, seafood, we all have the similar challenges when it comes to conducting business here and getting our product to market. In many ways. Yep, sorry.
So, no, it wasn't about aquaculture at all. It was more about the comments from the FFAW on the disparity of price of snow crab between the Gulf and what's caught here. So if you have to put aquaculture on the radar on the federal front, which I find pretty interesting because they have a different set of rules, different standards when it talks about the west coast of the country and the east coast of the country. So let's speak to the federal government first before we get to the province. What messages do they need to hear?
Well, generally, there's a number, and we work with our partners on the federal front with Kaya, and we focused on things like, ensuring that we have a stable environment for domestic food production, ensuring that we have the best science available, ensuring that there's investment in Agri-Foods Canada, and a couple of the questions in particular that NIA put to the parties involved, issues that are really hot at the moment. First, we asked them, to elaborate on how they would help the industry overall. But then we asked, what are they going to do about Marine Atlantic specifically? And we also have a large threat to the thousands of jobs in the industry on the south coast with a conservation area, as it's been called, that's being proposed, but would essentially close down thousands of square kilometres to any marine industries or even trying to access the land like mining, fishing, and aquaculture. So I think that's ill-conceived, and we're looking for some positions on those. So there are two specific ones that are really important to the people of the province and the industry right now.
In that proposed protected area off the southwest coast, does that include any current standing aquaculture operations, or is it limiting the potential for expansion into the future?
It's kind of like the yes and no, but it doesn't. The latest map doesn't overlap with any actual licensed sites. But there are concerns about traversing the area and shipping, smolt to sites and being able to go through those sites, because one of the goals of the NMCA is placing a majority of an area in a fully protected zone, and they're very strict on that. So that could hamper actual activity that is happening now. But the other part is also right. It's a concern that it's really dampening kind of the investment and expansion here. I mean, we got a ton of potential. Where maybe Norway, for example, is 75 times bigger when it comes to salmon production. Recently had a conversation with people from the Faroes who said, well, we just don't have any more areas that are really conducive to aquaculture. We wish we had what Newfoundland and Labrador has to offer. It's just an amazing potential. So with the tariff and the world trade issues, we don't need any more impediments to growing the economy and doing business here in this province. So, I think there can be ways to find the balance. Obviously, we got to be good stewards of the marine environment, but shutting down large areas and kind of putting Newfoundlanders and Labradorians out of work, I don't think is the way.
Wouldn't there be plenty of water outside of that where we could see aquaculture proponents set up shop?
Well, the area they're targeting, and I think it in some ways not coincidental. I think it's environmental groups, probably mostly from outside the province, really pushing that. Is probably the ideal location, most logical areas, and most conducive to doing the finfish farming. So northeast coast, obviously with the ice and different issues, is not as ideal. So certainly the south coast got a lot of potential. So I think that's the area where you would see growth. A lot of the expertise and infrastructure is set up down there. So logical on a lot of fronts that's the area that we would look to grow.
Provincially speaking, I mean, the province itself is bullish on aquaculture, I think is fair to say. And they've said as much out loud. That's not me reading between the lines. Other than recent comments about cleanups on sites, and some of those would have been, necessary pieces of equipment that are stored obviously close by operations. Some of it was sites that needed immediate attention to be cleaned up. But other than that, the province has really been a friend of the aquaculture industry. Or do you think that's a fair characterization?
I would say generally, and even Premier Fury was recently, as yesterday, talking about we've got to look for ways to grow the industry, to betterment for everyone in the province. So I think generally strong support by the public and people in the province, and I think it makes sense. So we just got to find ways to make it a little bit better. And one way we can do that, actually, which is an election topic, is ensuring that our transportation to market is more affordable and makes us more competitive with the rest of the world. And the marine Atlantic issue, which has been so expensive, I mean, for a while is a reality of conducting business here. But again, I highlighted this issue when we're faced with the threat of tariffs at the first Premier's Roundtable, and a credit to the Premier and Minister Byrne. They went out and got analysis done. It basically showed for every 5% increase in the ferry fees, it eliminates 110 jobs in the province. And one analysis showed that if they used a PEI formula, which was a 56% decrease, That would raise GDP $250 million. Household income would grow $88 million. These are kind of big numbers, but we know what it would do for businesses and people here. Reduce the cost of your fruit and vegetables and flour and everything else. It's important to know that this has to be for commercial as well as passengers as well. So it was positive to see that has been raised as an issue, and it looks like it's got some traction.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest. If there had not been any sort of verbal commitment to PEI about reducing $50 to $20 to cross the Confederation Bridge, I doubt we'd ever hear any of this conversation, because once they said it in PEI, of course this province, and rightfully so, would be talking about Marine Atlantic. And this is basically just pumping more money into Marine Atlantic because it's sold out over the peak part of the summer anyway. So I'm pleased to hear it, and we'll see where it goes. We've heard exactly what Mr. Carney says. Well, he says around half, which is pretty vague, and Mr. Polyev says he'll have a look at it, which we don't know what that will bring into the future. But anyway, that's that. Just a couple of quick questions. In the world of escapes from the pens, and we talked about some of the mass die-offs where we need to put the nets deeper and put in aeration systems and things like that. Up until this point of this calendar year, can you give us any idea what number of escapes have happened, if any? Zero escapes, and it's been like that for the last few years. I don't have the last year, but I know it's been multiple years without escapes, and I think it's a bit of a testament to just the modern equipment, the investment by companies, and just really doing everything in their power to make sure that they're being as responsible as possible, because we know that's this is just not good from any point of view. Well, it would be 100% necessary for their future as an industry, I would think, because we've seen the research done on some of the salmon counting rivers, what that has meant regarding escapes. So good for the industry, great for the environment, great for the wild stock. Anything else quickly, Keith, before we say goodbye? No, the only thing I mentioned off the top, 2024 was the highest value ever for aquaculture production in the province. So, I mean, it was really a good sign, and up over $280 million worth of products. So, hopefully that bodes well for the future. Some new species that are growing, trout and oysters, and some great products grown here by people in the province. So, hopefully that continues, and we can get the continued support of people all around the province for sure. Appreciate your time, Keith. Thank you. Thank you very much, Paddy. You're welcome. Bye-bye. It's Keith Sullivan, Executive Director at the Aquaculture Industry Association. Let's take a break. When we come back, Nathan's in the queue to talk about campaign signs, government red tape, then a hugely controversial program in the country, the gun buyback program, which we know very little about at this point. And then we'll speak with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Nathan. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thanks for taking my call.
Happy to do it.
First, full disclosure, I'm the campaign manager and official agent for Corey Curtis, who's the Conservative candidate in Cape Spear. I just want to call in, though, because obviously every election, there's going to be mischief with election signs. That just happens. And every riding, basically, that's happening across Canada. But the reason why I had to call in is because it's really stepped up quite a bit. I've been involved in elections for a long time, and I've never seen it like this. Lawn signs are being stolen off private and public property. They're being stolen twice in the same spot. 2 days in a row. They're being spray painted. They're being knocked down and thrown. It's really, really important that we have some respect for democracy. And I'm calling in because I really need the public's help on this. It seems to be a coordinated effort, and my hypothesis is that they're feeling like there's going to be a blue Conservative wave, and that Corey can really win this seat. So there's some one or more people out there that don't like that concept, and they're targeting our election signs as a result, is my thinking. So I'm really asking for the public's help. They can report it online at rnc.gov.nl.ca, or they can give us a call at our campaign office at 709-730-1132 if they see someone. License plate number and/or description is really helpful. Thank you.
No problem. I think it's juvenile to tamper with election signs, period. There's maybe a few too many and some in really bad spots. I'm not talking about Corey's signs or any one party or candidate. But I do think that if we look across the country, I'm not so sure one party's on the receiving end more than some other parties. There's a couple of pictures have been sent to me where there was a Liberal, a Tory, and NDP sign all on one prominent corner. I don't even know what community it was in, but every sign, all three were not just defaced, they were stolen. People ripped them right off of their mountings and stole them. So I don't know why people do it. I don't think it's going to impact the vote, period. Signs are important. Signs work. I mean, and you'll know this as a campaign manager, there's a quote-unquote science behind campaign signs. So, yes, please, regardless of who you support, regardless who you oppose, just leave the signs alone. Let democracy and nature take its course, and we'll count the ballots up on Monday, and we'll see where we go from there.
May I just say one more thing on that? Because
Sure.
I'll just say I totally agree with you that it's happening all over the country. But like to your point on the psychology of signs, I'll give you one example. We had over 15 signs on Park Avenue. Okay, put them all up. There's lots of red, lots of blue. It feels even and fair, right? Next day, every single one of those signs are stolen off of Park Avenue. Okay, so when you come down that major street, everyone in the community knows how big of a street that is. Not only did that take so much work on our part, but it's obviously creating a psychological effect for, that's what my hypothesis is that they're trying to do, is make it feel like, it's definitely in our community. Let me tell you, it's happening to one party for sure more than another. And it's highly concerning, and we definitely need to put a stop to that. So Mount Pearl, Callan Heights, St. John's West in particular, thank you so much.
Okay, and I'm just going to back this out from one party or another. But, I think there's interesting shifts in the way people either consume the news or what outlets they choose to pay attention to. But it's also about information. There's so much bogus information out there. It makes it really difficult, even for the most conscientious voter, to really know what they're getting themselves into when they read one meme or one opinion piece or another. And then it's the issue of costed platforms seemingly don't matter anymore. I guess I'm a bit of a wonk and a bit of a nerd. I like the numbers. Right? That's what I really appreciate, are digging in the numbers. So, even for the Liberals and the NDP, they're not getting a pass. They only released theirs the day before the advance polls closed. Your party didn't release it until after the polls closed. But at the same time, 7.3 million Canadians had voted in the advance polls with no earthly idea about what anything said by any leader or any candidate actually cost. I find that to be truly remarkable. We are voting on emotion. And signs and slogans, there's a reason why they might be even more important into the future, because if people don't care about policy and cost, then they'll care about the sign they saw and the slogan they heard. I think it's kind of indicative, and forgive me, people take offense to this. To me, it speaks to the dumbing down of the electorate, to be honest, because if the slogan gets you or a sign convinces you to vote for one party or another, that doesn't speak well for an informed electorate, in my personal opinion. Your thoughts?
I think, or listened to your opening earlier, I think that most people are absolutely still looking at the leader, and it is hard to tell. When you see, we'll put out one policy platform, for example, on Stop the Crime, next week you're seeing different parties mirror similar language, and it's very hard to figure out what's what in the election, to your point, and I think that might be why we're resorting to different symbolic cues in order to help us determine, the people who vote in advance polls, typically they already make up their mind. They're the base of support for all the different parties, for example, and they're people who are identified earlier in the campaign so that we can get out the vote. My thing is that there's a lot of people right now that are still undecided. I think that the reality is mainlanders are going to choose the next prime minister, and we have to figure out who's going to stand up and fight for Newfoundland and Labrador. And I do hope that everyone, if you haven't decided, you take a closer look at your local candidate, because they're the person who's going to stand up in caucus or fight for you. And I think that the pipeline example you gave earlier is another good one. Sure, there might be varying degrees of thoughts from different parties around pipelines, but the reality is that there is a sentiment and a philosophy within one party or another around how they feel about advancing the energy agenda, right? Like, that the Conservatives, it's a clear contrast. The Conservatives are definitely going to stand up for our oil and gas sector. I went to the Energy NL forum the other day, and business leaders in that community are saying it's very difficult to invest and get projects done because of the regulatory environment that the Liberal Party has created over the last 10 years. So I do think there's clear contrast. I do think it's hard to tell, but I do also think that we have to realize we only have 7 seats, and our province has unique needs, and we got to make sure that we have that view on the national stage in Ottawa.
This election, like most elections, will be decided in Quebec, the 905 and the 401. I mean, it's almost as fundamental as that. You can pretty much, without a crystal ball, predict how the seat count is going to go in Western Canada, maybe with the exception of BC, where the NDP had a bit of a stronghold. Looks like that's tenuous at best at this moment in time. So I think that's where it gets settled. And the pipeline thing, I think we're victims of oversimplification here. You know, regulatory issues, the industry is historically and notoriously reliant on certainty inside the regulatory world. But it's also price sensitive. Like everything else in this world, they have to borrow money to build things. And if they can't make a reasonable forecasted business model, then just this whole concept of building pipelines is way more complicated than we're hearing from politicians. Same thing with taxes. Like, I've got a bunch of people, Nathan, who are convinced that if the Conservatives are successful, they're going to pay 15% less income tax. Boy, oh boy. I mean, talk about not getting into the details here. The pledge from the party is 15% for the lowest tax bracket only. And that's 15% of 15%, so it's about 2.25% less in taxes phased in over years. But those types of things seep into people's minds. And it doesn't matter what the actual reality is. That they've heard it, they shared it, and now that's what people think. It's really, truly remarkable how we have arrived at this place where, you know, you just say one thing and all of a sudden it becomes this much larger, completely inaccurate thing, but there's no going back. People now think that's the case, and it's not. And you know it as well as I do. You understand, and you've seen the platform, you know the math. Anything quickly before we have to say goodbye, Nathan?
I just want to say, make sure that you get out to vote 8:30 to 8:30 on Monday. It's really, really probably the most important election of our lifetime. Could decide quite a lot of huge issues for our country and our province. So at least make sure you do that. And obviously, I want you to vote Corey Curtis, but I'll leave you to do that in secret at the ballot box. I
appreciate your time. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Peter, you're going to be next to talk about the government gun buyback program. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 4. And Peter, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you doing?
Not too bad at all. How about you?
Not too bad. I was just listening to Nathan there, and I'd like to say just before I get into my topic that I live in Cowan Heights, and for the last 2 weeks I've noticed actually adults kicking down the Conservative signs. I've never seen anybody touch the Liberal signs, and I took it upon myself many occasions to fix those signs. So, yeah, it is quite a problem up in Cowan Heights. I've been fixing them for the last 2 weeks now, putting them back up because I think it's ridiculous. But in any case, I just wanted to mention that. Last week, you were talking to a gentleman about, I think he was from Ontario, about the gun laws. So I was listening to that, and a lot of what he said was completely true, and a lot of what you said wasn't quite so true. And I'd just like to talk about that. Well, first of all, you were talking about, number one, the gun ban and how much you agree with it. And first of all, I'd like to ask you.
That's not what I said.
No, about the handgun ban. You think handguns should be banned. I'd like to know how you think banning handguns from law-abiding citizens is going to stop crime. I just want to ask you that question.
Well, for starters, I find the whole concept of, banning firearms from the law-abiding citizen, the issue is when we talk about crime in the hands of criminals and handguns and the role they play in crime, how do you cherry-pick who gets a gun ban? You either do it or you don't. I mean, that's the issue here, because if you have a handgun and you commit a crime, that's already on the books as a crime. The concern is just how freely the flow of handguns is happening across the American-Canadian border, and then consequently, once it gets into Canada, how easily it flows around, as opposed to you cannot do it. So you can't be half pregnant.
Okay, well, what you're saying is, it's the illegal handguns that are the problem. It's not the handguns that are in the hands of firearms, licensed firearm owners. Okay, my father, I don't own handguns, but my father does, and I know that you're under very strict rules when you have handguns. You have to have trigger locks on all of them. They have to be in separate cases, and then those cases have to be in safes. You have to get permission to move it from your house from the RCMP. It's not as easy as a lot of people think. And you made a comment yesterday. We got to get these guns off the street. Well, the guns that are locked up in safes are not on the street, Paddy. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
The illegal ones are on the street, yes, but the legal ones are locked up under strict rules, and they're not on the street. Okay. Now, there was also a comment made.
Can I speak to that for a second, though, Peter, before we move on?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, the 2022 law here is pretty clear, though. You cannot buy or acquire new handguns. If a business or an individual with specific authorizations to carry a gun, like Olympic shooting sports and all those things, existing handguns, if you own a handgun prior to the freeze, you can continue to possess and use the handgun. So that hasn't changed the issue for your father.
Sure it does. Because what happens when the barrel wears out and you need a new barrel? You're not allowed to buy a new barrel. What happens with if anything goes wrong with that firearm, you're not allowed to buy any parts to fix it anymore. You're not allowed. That's law. So therefore, if anything at all goes wrong with the gun, he can't fix it. So therefore, he just has to basically throw it away because it's no longer any good. So yes, it does. It does cause a problem, Paddy. What you're saying is not true.
Well, I just told you what the law says.
That's what the law says, but the laws. Now I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
You're a hockey player, right?
Sure.
You want a hockey stick?
Yeah.
If you hit somebody over the head with a hockey stick, can you hurt him? Can you kill him?
Yes.
Sure you can. So therefore, a hockey stick could be classified as a lethal weapon, correct?
I could rip your eyes out with the spoon that I ate my yogurt with this morning. Well, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China?
Absolutely, you can do it too. But how would you feel now? The shooting sports, especially with the handguns, like IPSC and stuff like that, you need a handgun. Now they're telling you, okay, you can go up to the range and shoot your gun because there's all other kind of guns that are legal, but you can't shoot IPSC with a rifle. You have to have a handgun. Okay, so how about if someone came to you and said, Patty, we just deemed that hockey sticks are lethal weapons. So therefore, we're going to have to say that you can have a hockey stick, but we have to change the way they're made. They now have to be made out of styrofoam so that they can't hurt people. Would you be interested in playing hockey with a styrofoam hockey stick?
Are you trying to make a serious point?
I'm making a serious point, yes. Would that affect your sport? Playing hockey, if you had to use a styrofoam hockey stick? Because I tell you, for the people who are in the IPSC that need a handgun, if their handgun is broken, they can't use it. If they if someone says, you can't use a handgun anymore, but in order to shoot IPSC, which you need a handgun for, because it's a thing all over the world, how are you going to do it with a rifle?
If a business or individual with specific authorizations, for example, if you have an authorization to carry a handgun involved in Olympic shooting sports, they're exempt from the freeze.
No, that's not true. Because I tell you, I'm a member of the range, and I know the guys that shoot IPSC up there. If anything happens to their gun, they're not allowed to get any parts. They're not allowed to purchase any parts to fix that gun. That gun can no longer. It's deemed useless.
So I guess the question, Peter, would be: is the concern of competitive shooting and the ability to replace a barrel or whatever the case may be, is that more important than trying to deal with the handgun actual criminal issue on the street? And because how do you police one but not the other? I guess that's the trick here, right?
Well, look, Paddy, what you do is, number one, this gun ban and the so-called buyback, it's a confiscation. It's not a buyback. And Rachel Bendayan and Pam Damoff, the Liberal MPs, I've heard them on several occasions say, we will not rest until Canada is completely gun-free. Their agenda is to eliminate every single firearm, and they're doing it gradually. They're doing it every 3 months. They'll come out with a new list. Every 3 months after that, they'll come out with a new list. That is their agenda, and whether you believe it or not, that is what I've actually heard them say it. I've watched them on TV in the debates and the what do you call them, when they were debating Bill C-21 and all that. All these people were there, and I've heard them say it, come out of their mouth, especially Pam Damoff and Rachel Van Duyn. They're so extreme radicals that it's not even funny, and that's what they want. They want no more guns.
I can only be accountable for what I say. And I didn't praise the gun ban in full. I didn't do it. So, I'll hear you out and not put words in your mouth, and I'd appreciate the same. So, what I said with the gun ban, the way it's currently been approached, it's been ham-fisted. There's weapons that are not prohibited that do the exact same thing as weapons that are prohibited. That doesn't make any sense. If we're talking about safety, that makes no sense at all. I've also been clear in saying the handgun issue, and I have no problem with the current law regarding handguns, but what I do say, and I've said it every single time since this conversation was born, is that if we're really going to do something about guns, and handguns in particular, it starts at the border. And it's not just me saying it. It's the Association of Police Chiefs of Canada.
It starts and ends at the border. I agree with you. It starts and ends at the border. That's the problem. The problem, look, we've had some of the strictest gun laws you could possibly have in this country for years and years and years. We've had no problems. Ever since they come in with this so-called, the gun crime has gone up. It's done nothing. It did nothing in Australia. It did nothing in New Zealand. It was all a failure. It's the same thing as drugs. Oh, well, we're going to ban drugs. Did that work? No, it didn't work.
Which I've said repeatedly. Anyway, it's 10:02 and 30 seconds, so I'm a little bit late for the news, Peter. But you and anybody else who would like to pick up on something I say, whether it be in the form of taking me to task or otherwise, more than welcome to call the show, and I appreciate your time this morning.
Okay, I got one last thing, too.
If you can say it quickly.
I can say very quickly. This term, assault rifle, okay? You use it, everybody else uses it. They call an AR-15 an assault rifle. It's not an assault rifle. It's not fully automatic. In fact, the assault rifle is a made-up term by Adolf Hitler, who described his fully automatic machine gun back in the day, the STG-44. And that's how he described it. He said it's an assault rifle. Assault rifle is, by definition, is a fully automatic rifle. None of the guns that are on this ban are assault rifles. All they do is they share the look of a scary army rifle. Now, the AR-15 has never been used in war.
You can there are four different methods. There's four different methods. 4 different methods to make the Colt AR-15 fully automatic.
It's illegal, though. But if you're doing it illegally, it's an illegal firearm, Paddy. But as it stands on the market, it's not a fully automatic rifle. But yeah, you can do lots of things. But you know what I'm saying? It's not easy. You got to really know what you're doing, and you got to be a trained gunsmith in order to do that. Okay. And I'm going to tell you right now, an AR-15 is not an assault rifle. It costs you $3,000 to do that, and it's illegal. And if any licensed gunsmith were to do it, he would be charged. And they're not going to do it.
I don't hop all over the AR-15 issue either. I know it's important to gun enthusiasts, but it's not something I jump on.
Without an AR-15, that also takes away from the three gun competitions for shooters. Okay. So therefore, they're out of their sport too. Penny, let's be fair. The more people are involved in sports shooting than play hockey in this country. You know that. I don't know that, but anyway. Yeah, Peter. Yeah, a lot more. A million and a half people are in sports shooting more than the 500,000 that play hockey in this country. So you're attacking a sport. It's a sport, and it's being attacked, and it's not right. Well, lucky for you then, because I'm not the one writing legislation, so I don't know what kind of attack I've had on sports shooting in the country. But anyway, I got to go, Peter. I appreciate your time. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. News. Welcome back to the program. Well, this week, for the first time in decades, corneal transplant surgeries took place right here in this province. Dr. Noor Nafal is a Toronto-based ophthalmologist and corneal specialist and joins us on line number 7. Good morning, Doctor. You're on the air.
Hi, Patty. Thank you so much for having me today with you.
Happy to have you on the program. There's a bunch of procedures that people in this province have to travel far afield to get, whether it be IVF treatments and, for decades, corneal transplants. Why did you decide to make your way to the Jackman Centre to perform these surgeries?
Oh, that's a great question, Patty. So I don't know if you knew, but my in-laws and many of my close friends are here in the province. So this community means a lot to me personally, and it was really important for me to use my skill sets and offer specialized care here in the province, especially something like cornea transplants, because it requires a lot of time to recover and someone to come with them. So offering this to people without the need to travel is really important. But I just want to highlight that this was really not a one-person achievement. That it would not have been possible without the dedication of many. For example, my colleagues in ophthalmology, like the chief, Dr. Kinderchuk, she really supported me, Dr. Jackman here at the clinic, and everybody at the clinic who have worked hard to make sure that the patients are seen and the wait list is produced, and now we're able to provide it and tackle it down. There was also everybody at the health science, the nursing staff. If you don't mind, I'll just mention a few names. Derek, Natasha, Jen, they worked around the clock to make that happen. TB Clift Limited, it's a local company, and they supplied us with the instruments. And finally, our partners at the Toronto Eye Bank, because the tissue, the corneas, came from Toronto with me. So as you can see, it takes a village, and it took all their support to be able to provide this for the patients here in Newfoundland, and we look really forward to supporting more patients in the future.
And so these corneas came from deceased donors?
Yes, they do. They come from people who decided to donate their organs, and particularly their corneas. And so in Canada, we have eye banks across the country in different provinces. They collect the corneas, they test them to make sure they're adequate for transplantation. But at this time, the demand outspaces the supply, and in Newfoundland, we do not currently have an eye bank.
And that's why I mentioned, because I do talk about organ and tissue donation on this program quite frequently, given the wait list and the amount of time and the fact we're talking about life and death, and in this case, your vision. So were these surgeries all the same? Now, forgive me, because obviously I am not a medical professional, but there are differences with replacing the entire cornea versus just outer middle layers, and there's something that I think that deals with the innermost layer of the cornea. So were these all the same procedure?
So you are correct. There are different procedures. There's the same cornea donation, so the same harvesting or collection from the patient, but the surgeries are completely different. The recovery is different. The way that we do it is different, but it's the same aim. So the cornea is that dome-shaped surface in the front of the eye. It acts like a window to allow patients to look through it. And when it becomes either scarred, swollen, or cloudy because of a disease, or sometimes because of an injury, a trauma, it blocks the vision, so you can't see out of it. It would be like looking through a frosted window. And so I can replace either the front, the entire cornea, or the back part of the cornea with healthy tissue, and that makes that window become clear again and restores sight.
Do we have an idea of how many people in this province are waiting for or in need of a corneal transplant?
Yes, so there's over 100 people on the wait list currently.
It's true.
And so to give you an idea,
okay.
So I started coming here a year and a half ago. I come here every 2 months for a week, and I see patients. And when I was seeing the patients, I was offering, if they needed a cornea transplant, I was offering them to be put on the wait list or to still be sent out to Halifax or Toronto, because at the time we did not have a program here, but we were building it. And so it was just to also have an idea. We don't have a registry, so we didn't know how many patients needed this in Newfoundland. It was all anecdotal. So after a few months in working on this, and thanks to the help of all the patients who advocated for this as well, and you in September for having one of the patients talk about this on Open Line, the province thought that it was a worthwhile program to go forward with, and everything went really fast, and we now have the tissues. I did 4 cornea transplants on Monday, and if you think about it, I come here 6 times a year, so that would allow me to do about 30 transplants a year. So with 100 patients on the wait list, that's a 3-year wait list. So although it sounds like a small number, it is a long, it's a high demand procedure.
Maybe you can convince some of your colleagues to do exactly what you're doing and make sporadic visits to the province. So this is obviously, it's obviously very good. Pardon me, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That is definitely the goal, actually, Patty. So we do have more steps to take this forward and to ramp up the availability here. So for me, I want to set up the infrastructure to allow people to donate their cornea in the province because we're relying on tissue from outside, and that limits how we can help patients. So if we can have a local donation program and recovery system, that would be a game changer. And then once that's set up, we can definitely then post a job for someone who's able to come here and work and offer this service full time, or to have more of my colleagues come in here as well and offer this service all year round. So that's definitely the next step. We're not stopping here. We're moving forward and trying to expand this program.
Is it someone with your specific skill set as a corneal transplant specialist also required in the harvesting process itself?
No, I'm not required in the harvesting process. That's done by a technician, very skilled technicians, and then they do need to be sent to an eye bank. In the past, that was done in Newfoundland, so we had nursing staff that would collect the corneas, and they were sent to New Brunswick, where they were tested and analyzed and then sent back here. At the time, it was only full-thickness transplants that were done, so now it's a lot more elaborate and a bit more complicated, but this is in discussions, and New Brunswick is opening to restarting this program, and so I'm in discussions also here in Newfoundland with the ministry, and we're going to try to get that up and going.
This might be a silly question, but Dr. Nofal, is the reason we weren't doing these procedures because we simply didn't have a corneal specialist?
Partly, it was that, and it was also because we didn't have some of the resources, and we didn't have tissue available here in Newfoundland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, ma'am.
When that program, that partnership with New Brunswick got discontinued, we didn't have any more tissue available.
I really appreciate your time. Anything else you'd like to offer before we say goodbye?
No, I just really want to thank everybody here in the province, and I'm really looking forward to providing more care to the local population here in Newfoundland and Labrador. So thank you very much for having me, Patty.
Happy to have you on. Congratulations, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. It's Dr. Noor Nofal. Now, corneal transplants taking place in the province. That's obviously brilliant, especially for those 4 patients who got the procedure on Monday. Let's take a break. When we come back, tons of time for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, sorry, we have a bad phone line there. David will take care of it. Let's go to line number 5. Todd Churchill, you're on the air. I'll put that on hold. Okay, let's see here. Let's try this one. Line number 4. Dan, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay. How you doing?
Not too bad. Just listened to your caller there, a few callers back talking about guns. Paddy, I, for many, many years, have a couple of handguns in my collection. I've used them target shooting, sports shooting. And now, over the years, responsible gun owners are being looked upon unfavorably, you know, with the craziness that's going on in the world with handgun violence and that. And I'd like to know where these handguns are coming from that the criminals are using. Back when I bought my guns back in the 80s, my guns were shipped to the RCMP, ballistic tested, and then a record kept of that. And then to take possession, I had to go to an RCMP detachment to receive my handguns.
Yeah.
So there's a fingerprint left of my handgun. You know?
I do.
So
to answer your question about where the guns are coming from, it's a pretty broad question, and we can only answer it based on the number of firearms, handguns in this case, that have been seized at the border. We don't know how many get through, so we can only base our numbers on what has actually been seized. 2023 numbers, 91% of the handguns seized coming across the American border. 91% of them came from the United States, of any handgun that was seized here. So that's remarkable. And there's actually been some real legitimate tracing programs. There was one example, this is a number of years ago now, where they went to a gun show in Georgia, and they traced those weapons, the handguns, right back to Toronto. And they were not caught at the border, but they did it on purpose. They let the handguns in just to see where that pipeline looked and who was involved in that pipeline. So we do know the vast majority of illegal handguns in this country obviously come from the United States.
So then why is it a person like me, getting a black eye for what criminals are doing?
I mean, I can speak for anyone else but myself, but I don't have a black eye view of yourself or Peter or anybody else that has a handgun out there for a non-criminal purpose. I guess probably easy enough to feel like that, given the way some people talk about guns. But I mean,
that's right. Some people do talk to people and tell them, "Oh, I got a hand. Oh my God, I'm this, I'm that." You know, it's craziness, right?
I don't have a gun. And I don't profess to know much about guns. I can only go with numbers, and I listen to people who I think know what they're talking about. Like the Chief of Police Association in this country. I look at the border numbers and seizure. I look at the process for ensuring we keep as many guns out of the country as possible. That's about all I can do, because I don't have one. I don't talk about them like I know what I'm talking about when we talk about guns. But I do think, like insofar as the handgun issue itself, I'm trying to listen and understand different perspectives here, but how do we actually clamp down on handgun, whether it be the sale, the transportation, and the transfer of guns, unless you do it for all handguns? Because for criminals who commit a crime with them, that's already on the books. So how do we keep the handgun issue under control without dealing with all handguns? That's the question that I have that I can't come up with an answer to.
Yeah, that's the question. Yes, that's right. There last year, my son is a responsible gun owner. He's out west, in Western Canada. I wanted him to take my handgun, and I wasn't allowed to gift it to him, sell it to him. The only thing the RCMP told me to do, I'd have to submit it in and have it destroyed. And I questioned it, and I said to him, when my gun was bought, I said, RCMP done a ballistics test on my gun. And I said, now you're telling me I cannot pass that down. But still now, my son could go to a gun store out west, and buy a handgun, but I couldn't give him mine. I don't understand the reasoning behind all this. It's not us, the responsible gun owners, that are the problem. It's the criminals that are bringing the stuff back and forth over the borders.
Everybody knows that, I think, and everyone will acknowledge that. Again, I think the question that I struggle to come up with a legitimate answer to is, how do you not deal with all guns versus some guns? And then I'll just talk about handguns. How do you not deal with it as a firearm in full versus in part? Because I don't know how that would work, right? So, and in the world of transfer, I don't know. Honest to God, I don't know. But in the world of, and the rationale offered behind the ban of the transfer of guns is because you might be the law-abiding gun owner, but whoever someone transfers a gun to might not be. I mean, I guess that's the concept behind, banning the transfer and the sale and the transportation of a handgun.
Well, my gun, I couldn't. If I wanted to, I couldn't gift it to my son or give it to him or sell it to him or sell it to you unless you had the proper credentials in your pocket. Like, I got a license in my pocket the same size as my driver's license that is restricted firearms permit with my picture and everything on it.
Yep.
So you just don't give it to anybody. You've got to have the proper credentials, to be cleared by the police that you can have a possession of a restricted weapon. And the thing is, I often wonder if they took all the handguns out of the equation, is that still going to stop the gun crime?
Well, it certainly would stop some. I mean, we know the issue with a handgun is much like if you're talking about using a long gun, there's reasons why criminals choose handguns because they're so easy to conceal, number one.
Yes.
Right? So, I mean, that's the handgun concern, is that I can have it like you see on TV in the back of my, against my back, in my belt line. But I'm not going to be able to do that if I'm going around with a shotgun, unless, you go around with a sawed-off shotgun and wear a trench coat. So it's the easy concealability that I think makes handguns a bit trickier in the firearm world. Dan, anything else you'd like to say this morning?
No, that's all. Just want to put it out there, that it's being unfair to some gun owners that are responsible. This craziness and the criminals, the imported guns. This is where the problem is.
Right, and with all of these changes in the laws regarding handguns, also changed the water on the beans for the punishment of committing a crime with a handgun, which has been long overdue as well, I would suggest. Dan, good to have you on the show. Hope you have a nice weekend.
You too, sir. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, well, I tried another one of those that I couldn't get on, Dave. Let's go to line number 6. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello.
Am I speaking to Patty now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good enough. I'm calling from Centro, and I wanted to talk about the election, but before the election, about 3 years ago, I contacted the current MP needing help with EI. I got no help from his office. So this past summer, I saw him at one of the civic gatherings. I spoke to him. I obtained his own personal information. I wrote to him about a more private matter, and I'm still waiting since the summer for a reply. So that even though I had assurance from him that he would respond to me, so that's how much representation I've had from that current member of Parliament. Zero.
And generally speaking, someone like your member and issues regarding EI, the vast majority of those concepts get taken care of by their constituency assistant. And I'm not excusing the MP because the MP, that's where ultimately where the buck stops. We're not being asked to vote for assistants. We're being asked to vote for MPs.
Right. But the second issue, I saw him in person, obtained his personal. He says, here's my personal contact information. I wrote to him, and he still have not responded to me. And I don't want to say the details what it is for now.
That's okay.
But he did. He assured me that he would help me. But then I wrote to him with his personal contact information. That was provided to me by him, and I got nowhere. Now, with that, I want to switch. He sent out a calendar for 2025. I received my calendar the 29th of January. So I flicked pictures on the calendar. I flicked through, and here we come to September. It says there's a picture of Gander. The background can be any airport. But the picture is not Gander. The picture is of a C-17 American C-17 Globemaster. It's American because it states American signals all over the aircraft from McGuire Air Force Base. And even without the current events between us and the States, if you're choosing to put military aircraft from a different country other than your own in your calendar, then there's military aircraft in Gander that he could have put there. But it shows a lack of empathy, a lack of understanding of what's happening in his district and across the country.
Fair enough, sir. And I say this all the time, especially about politicians. I would include businesses as well. When you have a constituent or a customer and they have a question for you, your best bet is to answer it. Even if it's not what someone wants to hear, an answer is better than silence. It really gets businesses and politicians in a lot of trouble. So even if I call you back and say, I can't help you, or here's what's wrong, or here's what I can and cannot do, at least you get an answer. It just displays that you've been heard, you're being taken seriously. But when you get ignored, that's where the most frustrating emotions come to play.
Yes. So this calendar, all the other pictures are ones across this district of scenery, and this one is supposed to say it's Gander. It's not Gander. It's of American military aircraft, and I was embarrassed and shocked and disgusted by to see that. I got a piece of mail on the 6th of April from the current person. Says, do you agree, on the 6th of April, asking, do you agree that Parliament should be recalled to pass our Canada First plan? Well, we're already into an election. What kind of games is that? That's pure waste of taxpayers' money to send that out. So that current member obviously has not had the best interest of this district, even though he's been loud on a few issues. Head hurt. We got a good candidate running by the name of Lynette Powell, an accomplished doctor who over 20 years has been advocating for the people in her area, and as she grew in practice, her area of advocacy expanded, and she's Didn't know her before, but I took the time to meet her. A very genuine, sincere, and down to earth and smart person.
And I'm sure they appreciate your support and those comments, caller. I wish you well. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
The very same to you. Bye-bye. All right. Before we get to the break, when we come back, we're going to speak with an oceanographer about the health of our oceans. Dr. Brad DeYoung joins us right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Just to set the stage for our next conversation, 20% of the protein we consume in this world comes from seafood. 90% of the global trade is conducted by ships. The ocean economy is the fourth largest economy in the world. Are we kind enough to the ocean for what the ocean provides to us? Dr. Brad DeYoung is a professor in the Department of Physics and Physical Oceanography at Memorial University, co-author of a survey titled Forecasting the Ocean, the 2025 to 2035 Decade of Ocean Science. And Dr. DeYoung joins us on line number 3. Good morning, Dr. DeYoung. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you on the program, sir. You know, in some corners, we know more about outer space than we do about the ocean, and we know what the ocean provides to us, and I'm not so sure humans are very kind to it. Where do we start with your survey?
Well, our conclusion is, on the whole, that we agree with that assessment. That two things. One, we don't know enough to manage even what we're presently doing, and we don't certainly know enough to look forward as to what are things going to be like in 10 years, because beyond the kind of immediate impacts we have, like fishing and overfishing and the complexity of that, is climate change. It's clear, I think, to everybody now that things are changing on the planet, and we have some idea of what's coming, but not enough.
We have some base numbers to work with, and I'm going to get you to elaborate as to what these mean. So if 90% of the global heat and roughly 30% of the carbon dioxide is captured by the ocean, why is that, and how is it changing?
Well, it's a good thing for us at the moment, because it means that rather than the carbon dioxide going up into the atmosphere and heating the atmosphere, it's being trapped in the ocean. Unfortunately, it's bad for the ocean because it makes the ocean more acidic, and that's beginning to have a real impact. But the challenge going forward is that the expectation amongst ocean scientists is that this will slow down, that the ocean has done a good job. It acts like a buffer to kind of mediate the CO2 we've been dumping into the atmosphere. But if it slows that down, then in future, more of it goes into the atmosphere. And so the rate of global warming, atmospheric warming, will increase. And so that's not a good thing. And we really can't say for certain what's going to happen. And that seems like a bad place to be, that we should try to work to kind of create a better understanding of what's really happening.
What is happening insofar as into the future you suggest that the ocean will capture less heat and less carbon dioxide? Is it because of the increased acidic nature of the water, or what's changing to cause that?
Well, it's partly just the capacity of the ocean. All of that heat and carbon dioxide is really in the surface waters of the ocean. Mm-hmm. Over time, the deeper waters, and that means the top sort of half kilometer of the ocean, the ocean's about 4 kilometers deep on average. So a lot of the ocean hasn't yet seen all this heat, all this carbon dioxide, but it takes the ocean about 1,000 years to turn itself over. That's how long it takes the whole ocean. If you were at the bottom of the Pacific and somebody said, when were you last at the surface of the water, it would be 1,000 years ago. And so it's a really slow time scale, and basically the surface ocean is doing its job, and part of it's the biology. There are phytoplankton, little small organisms that draw the carbon dioxide out. They're kind of getting tired of doing this. The acidity of the ocean changes the way in which the water absorbs carbon dioxide, and then the whole circulation of the ocean has begun to shift, and that's playing a role as well.
There's one interesting comment in the release that I read. It says, so few of the issues are local that it requires a different collaborative approach. So in your world of oceanography and ocean sciences, where is that collaborative approach lacking? Like, who else needs to be brought into this ocean research fold?
It's multifold, really. Partly it's just that we tend to work in little kind of boxes. Mm-hmm. So the physics guys are in one box, the fisheries guys are in another box, And the boxes don't really talk together well or work together well. And then on the international space, countries do their own thing. You know, they like to be proud of what they're doing and they focus on coastal waters. But now that we have a planetary kind of challenge, what we really need is to work together internationally. And of course, you know, you don't need to look too deeply into the news to see that's getting harder to do.
Absolutely not. We hear stories all the time about, like, for instance, microplastics and the fact that we're now finding it in the placenta of pregnant women and it's in the food chain. What impact does that have? And what do we understand about it? Because for some reason the world is addicted to plastic. Now, maybe some of that is the lobbying effort of the fossil fuel industry because it's required for the making of plastic. I can't go to Sobeys without seeing an individually plastic wrapped cucumber. If I buy an action figure, it's got enough plastic to fill the garbage can in my studio. So what do we understand about that and the impact that's having?
Look, at the very least, that's a clear marker of the fact that what we're doing has a global, reach. You can find those microplastics in, the surface waters in the Arctic Ocean and the Antarctic, and as you say, in animals all around the planet. So clearly, what we're doing is spreading across the whole planet. The impact of the little tiny beads of microplastics, which come from like washing your fleece, where the water from the fleece then goes out into the ocean, and those are little tiny micro beads of plastic. They're probably the things that will have the most impact on organisms. The big pieces of plastic, like your bags and, all the other nonsense that we pull from, stores and wrapping and such, that has a kind of a different kind of impact. But on the whole, it's back to kind of an unawareness. We know where it is, but we don't know what it's really doing.
But it can't be doing anything good, and that's spoken as a layperson. No. Let's just stick with warming waters. Yeah, we talk about, say, the food chain and the nutrition required for. We'll talk about forage fish like capelin and mackerel and those types of things. But what we don't see necessarily with the naked eye in full is what warming water means for things like phytoplankton. So it's part of the marine food web, and we know that the warming oceans have a negative impact on it. How do you want people to understand that? Because we can talk about warming waters and what it means for migratory patterns for fish, what it means for where the lobster are, where the crab are, and those types of things. But you have to start at the base of the food chain to understand the end of the food chain.
And that's back to my point about getting all the boxes to work together. Fisheries, management in general has focused on the things we catch, and that's important and necessary, but it's not enough. Because as you say, those fish eat littler fish, and those littler fish eat the plankton that, are the primary food source in the ocean. And unless you know what's going on there, you really don't know what's going on with the fish over a longer time scale. And fishery scientists are all aware of this. We just don't commit enough resources, and we don't coordinate the work well enough. So DFO does really great work, but it often sits out on its own and doesn't connect with the work that scientists at the universities are doing, or scientists or researchers from some of the fishing companies who go out and make measurements. So we don't pool it all together to understand that kind of full view of what's going on.
You talk about the silos and the amount of data that might be out there and the amount of data that has not been compiled. What role would artificial intelligence play in, utilizing different technologies into the future, bringing these silos or boxes closer together so that we can crunch the data at breakneck pace compared to what we're currently traditionally used to?
Even scientists who are beginning to use AI, which I am in a couple of projects, can't really tell you exactly what it's going to look like, but we do know it will change the way in which we do science. It'll change the way in which we communicate. So one example is right now, the weather forecast model you rely on that tells you what the weather is going to be in 10 days is a huge complex thing that runs on a massive computer that takes, a day or so to run a forecast. There are people now running AI models that kind of work on your, the equivalent of your phone and take 10 or 15 minutes to do something similar. Whether that turns out to be the real kind of game changer or to something else, it's very clear that that kind of AI is going to change the way in which we use information from the ocean. And what it will support is the kind of knitting together the boxes, because you can use those tools to kind of connect information from different ocean perspectives.
Dr. DeYoung, really appreciate your time. Would you like to say anything else this morning?
No, I just say that I was going to offer one really cool example of how working together can do something, and that is a program called Argo, which is a global program. Canada contributes to it, and there are these little floats about the size of a human body. They sit at about a kilometer's depth in the ocean. There are about 4,000 of them spread across the entire planet, and every week or so, they go down another kilometer and then come up to the surface and tell us what they've seen. And those profiles give us a snapshot of the global ocean, which then drives the weather forecast that allows you to get a 10-day weather forecast. Because beyond 5 days, the forecast doesn't mean much unless you know what the ocean is like. And so it's an example at the global scale of what we can do if we work together. Really, I think that's really a cool example.
It is, and I'm glad you pointed it out this morning. I really appreciate your time, Dr. DeYoung. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you, Paddy.
Take good care. Bye-bye. Dr. Brad DeYoung, who is a oceanographer and a professor at Memorial's Department of Physics and Physical Oceanography. Let's take a break. When we come back, Todd, you're next to talk about Tom Osborne. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line 5. Todd, you're on the air.
Morning, Paddy. How are you doing this morning?
Very well. How about you?
Pretty good. Full transparency, firstly, before I start here, I'm a member of no political party, and I'm not affiliated with any campaign of anybody. So I just want to make that clear. I just want to do a little bit of a preface before I go into what I called about. I want to remind your listeners that my son is Carter Churchill, and people will be familiar with the story of Carter Churchill from the news when we fought a very long and protracted human rights battle against the education system of our province. Carter is deaf, of course, and deaf education is very poor here. We fought a very long and protracted battle. The Newfoundland and Labrador English School District leveraged a tremendous amount of legal resources and financial resources against us. As a matter of fact, they spent over in excess of $748,000 of taxpayer money. That's your money and my money and the money of your listeners, to hire a private law firm to try to grind down a deaf child in a wheelchair so we would give up. So I just want to lay that out, that background for your listeners. So what I'm calling about is Tom Osborne. Tom Osborne, of course, is the candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada in the federal riding of Cape Spear. And the party is irrelevant because Tom Osborne could run for the Conservatives or the Green Party or the NDP. I'd be saying exactly the same thing as I am right now. Those 5 years that we fought Carter's human rights battle, of course, Tom Osborne was the education minister of our province, the top elected official in the education system of our province, did nothing to stop what was happening to my son, did nothing to stop what was happening to us as a family, could have easily intervened, didn't. It was a phone call. All it took was a phone call, had there been any will on the part of Tom Osborne to call Tony Stack and say, Tony, this family has been through enough. This child has been through enough. Do right by this child. So flash forward to this past Monday, we actually went to a Meet the Candidate session hosted by the Mount Pearl Chamber of Commerce and had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Osborne after the session was over. A few things came out of that. One, he said as the education minister of our province, the top elected official, he had no ability to intervene, which I don't believe for a moment, because ministers wield a tremendous amount of power in the departments that they oversee. They are the top person. There's no one above the minister. I think you'd agree with that. He also said even something more mind-blowing, and I would like to know your opinion on this. Mr. Osborne said that when the decision came out of a finding of discrimination for 4 consecutive years against my son, he said he cheered for it. He was supportive. He was our biggest cheerleader. So I just asked for your comment and what's your feeling on being told that if you were me and I was you?
Well, it's difficult for me to walk a mile in your shoes, even though I'm intimately familiar with this story and the years it took and the ruling at the Human Rights Commission. I guess I'll start with saying this. For it to ever have been the case for Carter and everyone else in the school system who is in need of additional supports, and in this case, American Sign Language, for that not to have been in place is a crying shame and a betrayal of Carter and everyone else who needed those services, number one. Number two, if I have the authority to do something about it, but don't, and end up spending $750,000 to fight a legal challenge, knowing I'm in the wrong the entire way, then not only is that a waste of money, but it's a second shameful experiment offered by the provincial government. Third, if you felt that way, you had time and ample time to do something about it prior to the legal challenge. Now, some of that advice, of course, comes from Justice and the Executive Council and those types of things, but you cannot have it both ways in this world, regardless of who you are or how popular you are or how long you were in MHA or how new you are to the business. If you feel it, say it. If you don't, be quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's easy to say after the fact when he's running now for another elected office, I was supporting you behind the scenes. The third thing that came out of that conversation was he said, what happened to our son was regrettable. That's the exact word he used, regrettable. And I take strong offense to that because that's not the word I would use to talk about the destruction of a vulnerable child's future. Last night I burned supper. That was regrettable. But destroying a vulnerable child's future, regrettable is not the word I'd use for that. What I took away from the conversation with Mr. Osborne, that he takes zero accountability. He will run his campaign saying, I was the minister of these portfolios and I was the minister of education and look at a great job I did and please elect me again. But he takes no accountability for what happened on his watch. 2 of the 5 years we fought, Tom Osborne was the Minister of Education. And when a question came up in the House of Assembly on deaf education, it wasn't Tony Stack that stood up and answered those questions. It was Tom Osborne that stood up and answered those questions. And every single time, he never did defend my son or any deaf child in this province. What he did was defend the education system and defend the discrimination of what was happening by spinning, deflecting, denying, or giving a non-answer. And that's the Tom Osborne I know. And again, he could run for anybody. I would say the exact same thing. And for people who are listening and saying, that guy is obviously this party or that party, and he's just going against the Liberal Party. Last fall when Darren King was making rumblings of running for the Conservatives in central Newfoundland, I came out equally strong against him because, of course, Darren King was the education minister back in 2010 when the Newfoundland School for the Deaf was closed in the first place.
Right.
A catastrophically bad decision. I came out equally vocal against Darren King, and he was a Conservative. So this is not, I like one party or I like another party. This has to do with individuals and their past records. And I think, to be honest with you, an individual like Tom Osborne, if he won't stand up for a vulnerable child, one of the most vulnerable complainants, that's how the adjudicator described my son in the ruling, who would he actually stand up for if he will not stand up for a vulnerable child?
Todd, points taken and understood. I appreciate your time. I hope you and your family are well.
Yeah, and I'd like to add one more thing. I encourage people to go to our Facebook page we use to advocate for deaf education. It's called Deaf Children Matter. I've made a couple of posts about Tom Osborne and his past record as education minister, and I encourage people to go in and like and share that comment if they agree with it. And perhaps share their own perspectives of Tom Osborne and their experience, be it good or bad. If you had a great experience, by all means, post and say, I reached out to Tom and he was fantastic. Share that too.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. One thing I'll say before I get to the news, the Carter-Churchill ruling, what I had hoped, not only that it closed that chapter, even though it was shameful, is that it would set the precedent for everyone in the system who needs additional supports and that are not in place. We know now that they must be in place. Let's take a break. When we come back, Dwan Street, the president of the FFAW, and then you. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Dwan Street is the president at the FFAW and joins us on line number 7. Good morning, Dwan. You're on the air.
Hey, Patty. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. Before we get into it, did you hear Jeff Loader on the program? I think it was yesterday.
So I heard clips. I didn't get to hear his full call, but I did get the gist of what Mr. Loader was saying.
He's quite displeased. And so it's basically about one statement from your group and from you saying that you believe the processors are engaging in anti-competitive behaviour compared to their counterparts across Atlantic Canada and appear to be undercutting the price of snow crab is what can be seen as a move to force price reconsideration after your latest victory. What anti-competitive behaviour are you referring to?
So, Patty, I mean, it's unfortunate that, there's three certainties in life: death, taxes, and something sketchy going on in the Newfoundland and Labrador crab fishery, right? As your listeners are well aware, I'm sure, we had a significant win in front of the price-setting panel this year. Last year was the first year where we really kind of got into a formula structure where harvesters were starting to see a fair market return for their product. And what we did this year, we were successful in winning the decision, getting a formula where harvesters are finally seeing a market return that makes sense, a fair price, and we haven't seen that historically. So, we were kind of waiting to see what was going to happen and throw a wrench into that. So we get the first quote from Erner Barry on Tuesday for Newfoundland and Labrador snow crab 5 to 8 inch sections. And we've been keeping an eye on the Gulf price, which was quoting very steadily at $9.50 Americans, $13.12 Canadian. And all of a sudden we see the Newfoundland products start quoting at $8 US, so at $11.05. I mean, that is a gap that we have never seen. We did a little bit of analysis, looked over the last 5 years, and, generally you're looking at the first report, you see 13 cents, 10 cents, 12 cents, and this year 207, right? I mean, it's completely nonsensical. And, just looking back, trying to figure out why that gap would be there, there's just no answer.
So I wonder what this province's processors could have to do with the price in the Gulf. Because if you guys won with your end-of-season receipt collecting, got the price that you were looking for, what role could the processors in this province play in the price set there? Because, like, for instance, in Cape Breton, if they had MPRs until this year, the Premier opened it up for the so-called interprovincial trade, what have you, which certainly leads to a better price for their crab. So the basic question is, what could this province even do to influence a higher price for the Gulf? Because the price was set here, and you got what you got, and you claimed it a victory. So what can we influence the price of Gulf crab?
Oh, we're not claiming that they're influencing the Gulf price. What we feel is happening is certain processors are very likely underselling our product, dumping cheap crab into the market, which is a very dangerous practice, to try and drive down that price, because once that price hits $10.60 Canadian, we go back to the panel. And that would be a very, very convenient result for the processors in this province. Now, they would have to prove, that the price they're paying is not correct, and that a lower price is the fairer price to harvesters. But, I mean, you don't have to be an economist or a market analyst to see why they would want that to happen, because of the old concept of buy low, sell high, right? I mean, obviously, cheaper raw material, and then all of a sudden they can start pumping it into the market and getting a higher return for it. And, it's unfortunate that we're here, and that's where our minds are going. But until we see something that proves differently, that, as far as we're concerned, that's what's going on here.
If I'm running a business, let's just take the example you just offered. So with who knows how much of the tax to be landed before the 1060s hit, and back to the drawing board we go. So you're basically saying that they are costing themselves money to maybe recoup it and to add additional revenues if and when there's a price readjustment. Pretty dangerous calculation to make, knowing that historically speaking, the price softens towards the end of the season itself. So your position is what you just articulated, and so be it. But for me, if I'm running a business like that, then I'm not very good at it, I don't think.
Well, it's hard to trust anything that the members of the ASP do when they came in at the beginning of negotiations and offered $3 a pound, right? And I mean, we know what crab is being sold for. We know what the prices are in the Maritimes, what harvesters are getting, and the $5 up from $4.97 was more than fair with an adjustment at the end of the season when we saw what exactly that product was going for in the market. There has been a fairly high volume landed in the early weeks of the season. We were able to get harvesters on the water early this year, which was great. Everything seems to be going well when it comes to catch rates, and we're not hearing any complaints from harvesters when it comes to, plant gluts or scheduling or anything like that. But there always just seems to be something. And even just speaking with our market analyst here at the union, he's looking at this and he's like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, it's just a complete anomaly. And, I did hear Mr. Lower's comments yesterday about saying, we shouldn't be talking about this. And the unfortunate fact of the matter is we need to be talking about it. And, I understand Mr. Lower's position, because if my members' behavior was, a little bit fishy and a little bit sketchy, I wouldn't want it in the news either. And if we're going to be putting product into the market and underselling it, that's going to have ramifications down the road for years. If our product is seen in the market as going for a lower price, as an inferior product, that's going to have an impact. And we're really concerned with what's going on here. Urner Barry reported again last night, and the prices haven't changed. It's $8 US for Newfoundland and Labrador crab, $9.50 for Gulf. So that's a significant discrepancy. Urner Barry reports every Tuesday and Thursday. I guess we'll see what happens next week. Bigger sizes of crab, other than 5 to 8, haven't started quoting yet. That's going to be interesting. It's just right now, this is really, really concerning. And until we get explanations, we're just going to have to believe that our suspicions are correct.
What do you say to Mr. Lower? I don't want to put words in his mouth. I'm trying to carefully recall exactly what he said. He said another complicating factor here is that the Gulf crab made it into the market well before ours. So what influence do you think that has on price?
That happens every year. I mean, this is not an anomaly when it comes to season. If anything, we close that gap by getting on the water earlier and getting into the market around the same time. The Gulf always starts earlier. So, that part of his argument doesn't make sense either. Mr. Loader was very defensive. And, again, I would be too if something like this was going on and I couldn't explain it.
Does the union oppose... we're talking about free enterprise. And if you ask 10 people, you get 10 definitions of what free enterprise means. But was the union opposed to interprovincial trade barriers to be removed regarding where the product can be bought, shipped, and processed?
We've been fighting for outside buyers to come in and to ship out that product for years. And, the provincial government did make significant gains in allowing folks to do that. It's unfortunate that I don't think a lot of folks realize that most of the buyers in the Maritimes are somewhat connected to the buyers here anyway. And our harvesters are able to ship to the Maritimes if they want to. I know there is one vessel right now that is going to land in Nova Scotia because they have the capabilities to do that when it comes to RSW and whatnot. So, there is a fair amount of freedom to go back and forth. So, we're not hearing complaints from harvesters on that aspect. It's just... we just want to be treated fairly here, and we want to make sure that the buyers that we have here are operating in good faith. I know whether that's at the negotiating table or if it's at the wharf. And, until we see something and concrete evidence that that's happening, we're going to continue questioning when we see something like a $2.07 gap in price in the market that makes our product look inferior to Gulf crab.
I appreciate the time, Dwan. Thanks for calling this morning.
Thanks, Daddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Dwan Street, President at the FFAW. Let's take a break. When we come back, Dr. Lynette Powell's in the queue. She's the Liberal candidate out in Central. Frank wants to offer a bouquet to the tradespeople working on a particular project. And remember, we're talking about the recreational food fishery. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Before we get to the news, let's go to line number 2. Barry, you're on the air. Barry, are you there?
Sorry there, Paddy. I didn't hear you. I'm driving, just pulling over there, buddy. Paddy, good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
No problem.
Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. Talking about the fishery Patty. We learned a lot along the way, and from now on, we're going to be calling it the Newfoundland and Labrador recreational groundfish fishery, and that's what we want to end, and we want to have our food fishery back. We want to have it back the way it used to be, with a limit, as what we're suggesting. There's all kinds of people that saying they agree with what we're doing. However, our petition still is around close to 2,100 signatures, and I'm just appealing to everybody who's involved with the food fishery, whether you're a business, whether you're a fisher, whether you're a boy or girl or whatever the case may be. Please go online to our Facebook page, Food Fishery Fighters, and sign our petition, please. Every year, it's the same thing around the wharves and the stageheads, complaining and griping about how unfair and how unsafe our food fishery is. And I think it's about time now, with the change in government, or the election, and also with the moratorium being lifted. And every country foreign countries can come here. It seems everybody in the world can come here fishing, except for Newfoundland and Labradorians, who are relegated to catching to 3 days of fishing and relegated to 5 measly fish per day. We're basing our case on discrimination, Patty. We're being discriminated against. I truly believe that, and I think that our petition is not asking for a lot, but what we are, by granting us what we asked in the petition, will make our food fishery a safer and fairer system for everybody to enjoy and partake in, and not have any trouble, hopefully.
Appreciate the time, Barry. Give us the petition site one more time.
Yes, Patty, thank you. The petition is on our Facebook page, Food Fishery Fighters. You can also find the petition on change.org, and everything is explained in the petition itself. And, people are saying they're having a hard time with it and everything else, but that over 2,000 people have signed it. So people are maybe using it as an excuse, saying they can't find it or whatever. The apathy level in Newfoundland and Labrador is unbelievable. I think it's time that we turn the apathy level into us, what we used to call ourselves, the Fighting Newfoundlanders. And that's no reference to violence, of course, Patty. But the Fighting Newfoundlanders have a strong voice. We just need to be roused. And I'm trying to rouse us, Patty. I'm doing the best that I can. We're a group of concerned citizens who have no ulterior motives other than just try to make it a safer and fairer system, Patty.
Appreciate the time, Barry. Thanks a lot.
As always, it's been a pleasure, Patty.
My
Thank
pleasure.
You very much.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's get Frank before we get to the news. Line 4. Frank, you're on the air.
Good morning, sir. I'm glad you took my call this morning.
No problem.
I just wanted to give a shout-out to the Newfoundland tradesmen in general, but specifically to the tradesmen that worked on the West Rose drilling platform. Man, that's an impressive drilling platform. I was looking at that on TV, and I was impressed by it. And it makes me proud to be able to give a shout out to the tradesmen that worked on that. And just wanted to say they've done a great job, and it's good to see that drilling rig going out. We need to get more oil into this province.
People refer to it as an engineering marvel.
Exactly. It's tremendous. And Patty, the Newfoundland people is well known for their work ethic. Wherever you go, you'll find companies trying to get Newfoundland workers. And we do a great job of everything that we put our hand to, and it's so impressive, that part in itself. Patty, I wonder if I could pivot a little bit here. I just wonder what your take is on a couple of things here. I was a tradesman all my life. I'm 81 years old right now, and I finished my trade in 1974 in Labrador Line of Ward. And I worked there until 1977. and the mill shut down for a couple of years, and then it was sold again. But in that, when it shut down, I applied for a job as a millwright, and I've got a red seal across Canada. I think I had 6 offers across Canada to be a millwright for them, and I ended up going to British Columbia. And you know, the trades out there at that time, every company out there was looking for tradesmen, and I went to work at a pulp mill in Mackenzie, British Columbia, and I worked in 2 more pulp mills after that, and then I worked in a couple of sawmills. And Patty, I want to say to you now, all those mills are shut down now. They're gone, and that's because of changing technology with our computer systems and lack of needing paper, and also not being able to sell our wood. So these things seems like industry only lasts for a certain period of time when it's replaced with something else. But I want to say to you, I'm proud of the BC people. When they saw your industries going down, they turned to LNG plants, and they just finished up one in Kitimat, and they're way ahead of us. We've got thousands of tons of natural gas being burnt out on those drilling, and not only thousands, we have millions of tons of gas being burnt on these drilling rigs. And I'm telling you now, we need to take that gas and turn it into liquid natural gas and build some plants here in this province. And the question I have for you,
and very quickly,
I don't understand why we have emission taxes going up for the investors here in this province. We've got the cleanest oil probably in the world, and I can understand bitumen in Alberta being having the emission taxes go up, but I can't understand it here. And for Mark Carney to shut down our oil business in this province, he's just a banker. And I'll tell you what, it would be a crime to have that happen here in this province.
I appreciate the time, Frank. Thanks for the call this morning.
All right, sir.
All the best. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Say good morning to Dr. Lynette Powell, the Liberal candidate out in Central. Dr. Powell, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you for giving me this opportunity this morning. I really appreciate it.
Happy to have you on the show. So, seemingly this year, it's more about the leaders than ever before, as far as I can tell anyway, sitting in this seat. So, as a candidate, as an individual, how do you differentiate yourself from the leader, even if you're totally in lockstep with the leader, because still some people do vote for the candidate, not just the party?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Patty. You know, I can tell you why I stepped up to this. We've talked before. I'm a family doctor out in Central Newfoundland. I've lived here most of my life. I'm pretty passionate about this region. I stepped up because I have 3 adult children who want to live here. And, you know, I understand what it's like to live in rural Newfoundland. I understand the challenges here. And I believe that I've had enough opportunity over the last few years in my advocacy work for healthcare, in my role as president of the Medical Association, as well as, you know, my medical education, teaching young doctors, to kind of really understand what matters on the ground here in Central Newfoundland. And that's why I'm here. I mean, I'm here to help my district and to help make things better for the people here. That being said, I believe in Mark Carney too, right? I had the opportunity to sit with him in Gander, and I felt like he was a man of integrity. I felt like he stepped up to this for the right reasons. He said to me, you're not here because you have to be here. You're here because you want to be here, and that's why I'm here as well. And that resonated with me because, I could have stayed as a family doctor. That job worked okay, and it made me happy, but I want to help more than that. So that's why I stepped up.
Advocating on behalf of the healthcare system, what role do you think the federal government plays here? Because we know there's federal healthcare transfer dollars. Sometimes it's earmarked for very specific purposes. So as a member of parliament, if you're fortunate enough to win, is it about advocating for a national license, national standards to be as opposed to provincial restrictions and the time and the paper warfare required even for a locum? So as a member of parliament, what would you be talking about on the healthcare front?
So thanks for that question for sure, and I have a lot of passion about this one. The health transfer payments, you're absolutely right. We have to make sure that people understand that we're in a rural area. It costs a lot to deliver health care here. We need to make sure that the federal transfer payments are earmarked for the right things, and that a rural lens is being put on all of the decisions made in Ottawa to say this is what it's like for us in rural Newfoundland and Labrador. And you bring up an excellent point. I did some work with the Canadian Medical Association as the NLMA president. There's a lot of barriers right now to mobility of healthcare workers, and it really needs a federal lead. It needs federal attention to take this on so that we can actually increase mobility of healthcare workers. That would help a lot of our small communities. I'm sitting here today in front of the medical clinic in Lassie that usually had a doctor year-round. That's not what they have now, and there's a lot of people down here who are really suffering because they don't have good access to health care, and I see them every day that I work in the orphan patient clinic in Grand Falls, Windsor. So I want to have an impact there. I want our rural communities to be back on the map in terms of being places where you can get health care access. That's so important to the people who live in these places. And it's important to the industries here. You cannot have vibrant economies in any of our rural Newfoundland communities. Fishery, dangerous business, right? We have to have health care for the people working in these communities. It breaks my heart that, we can't get enough health care providers.
We got a shortage of a bunch of different professionals in this country, skills trades and healthcare pros. So you made a focus on rural. And I know you can't drive this bus as a member of parliament, but whether it be national standards for accreditation and some sort of renewed focus on training rural hopefuls as doctors, because they're much more likely to go back where they came from. We only have 17 medical schools in this country. Maybe time to consider it. And also in the world of residency, a Canadian-born doctor trained abroad having a devil of a time to get a spot as a resident in this country. Those two things, training in rural for rural hopefuls and for trained abroad residents that cannot get back to the system here. Those things are badly broken. And I know members can't, overstep provincial colleges, but there may be some federal guidance required on those two fronts.
Absolutely, and I 100% agree with you. I was involved in rural training for years, and you look around our rural communities in central Newfoundland, the stable communities were teaching sites. Many of the physicians there, I was involved in their training, and I had the privilege of working with them. And now they've stayed, and most of them are from rural Newfoundland and Labrador. So we have to put a focus on that. We have to focus on keeping our own at home, and we have to make sure that there's not barriers for young people in rural communities going off to university and being in excessive student debt, right? Just to be able to get through the door of the medical school. Myself, I was in my 40s paying off student loans from medical school because I came from a rural community and spent many years in St. John's training, accumulating student debt. And so I paid off my student loan in time to pay for my kids to go to university. And, these are barriers, right, to all people working in rural areas. We all want our kids to succeed, and we all want to have them to have the same opportunities. But there's lots of policy that needs to look at what it's like to live in rural Newfoundland and why we're not accomplishing what we need to be.
I appreciate your time this morning, Dr. Powell. Good luck on the last few days of campaigning.
Thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it. Have a great one.
The very same to you. Bye-bye. Dr. Lynette Powell, Liberal candidate, running out in Central. Let's get a fundraiser in before we run out of time. Line number 3. Steve, you're on the air.
Hi, Paddy. Thanks for taking the call there.
No problem.
I'm used to running into you from time to time at the Sci-Fi in Iraq, not doing a fundraiser here.
Okay, what's on your mind this morning?
Okay, well, actually, I'd just like to tell folks about an upcoming fundraiser with the benefits to go to the Heart and Stroke Foundation as well as to the Elks Club. It's going to be held on Sunday afternoon, May the 4th, Star Wars Day, starting at 2 o'clock at the Elks Club itself. It's going to be a sports trivia tournament in memory of Dennis Bird, a longtime teacher in St. John's. By any chance, did you have him in school?
I did not, but I know who he is.
Okay. Well, in addition to being a teacher, he was also a well-known baseball player, and later on in his career, he picked up rowing. And in addition to being an athlete, he was also very good at trivia, including sports trivia. So the tournament is in his honor. His wife will be there, and possibly his daughter. But basically, we're encouraging people to come down with a team, maximum of 6 players. It's going to cost each player $10 to get in, and then the Elks Club are going to be providing some prizes of gift cards for the winning first place team and second place team, and then there'll be some individual prizes as well. So hopefully people will find it a fun afternoon, and both the Elks Club and the Heart and Stroke Foundation will benefit from your generosity there.
Hopefully it's a roaring success. I appreciate your time. Tell us about it, Steve.
All right, again, thanks again for your time, dear guy.
Happy to do it. All the best.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. All right, time for the final break of the morning and the week. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Tina, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
I'm calling today because I heard the Mr. Churchill on talking about his son Carter, and I actually worked with the Human Rights Commission when that started. But I also want to bring up Tom Osborne and the reason I won't be voting for Liberals. I have been, for the last 10 years, trying to get someone to tell me if there was an inquiry into the Department of Justice Office of the High Sheriff, if there is any investigation going on. Now, I have not been quiet about what happened and my experiences working with the Office of the High Sheriff on social media. And I'm not going to be quiet because I believe that's the problem. Too many people are being quiet about it. And since I've come out, I've heard from other people that are afraid to come forward about abuse, being abused in their workplace, and being harassed and sexually harassed, and too much being ignored. Now, Tom is one of the people that I confided in first. Tom ignored everything. While I was there, I was also steadily applying for positions, and Tom knew. And Tom was the head of the executive for one position I applied for, and Tom agreed with me that I was being treated wrong, but still went along and had people sign off on a position that was given to another lady there. A similar situation to the Mitchell Moore fiasco. So I felt it was necessary for me to speak out today against Tom and, you know, his lack of help for me, even though he was one of the first people that knew about me being sexually harassed, and that I should have came forward earlier with the Me Too movement, and the same as other women come forward with. I've been trying to get a lawyer for my case for months and months now. No luck yet, because in my opinion, they're afraid to come forward. They know, well, I have actually been told by one media outlet that they would like to take my story, but they can't in fear of losing their job. So that speaks volumes as well. Tom ignored me over and over and over again. Yet this past week, Tom's team keeps leaving messages on our home phone asking for his support and telling us he's there to help people, and telling us his reputation speaks volumes for him in a roundabout way. And I'm here to tell Tom today, if he's listening to this, that I will not be supporting him, because he has shown me who he really is. And I don't care if it's political, personal, or whatever it is. In my opinion and my experiences of what I've went through for the last 10 years and still feel and still get triggered by when I see people from that workplace, and Tom, He's not for the people of Newfoundland, and Liberals are not, because it's not only Tom I reached out to. I reached out to Andrew Ferry, I reached out to Dwight Ball, I reached out to Andrew Parsons, and I have a long list of people I reached out to that just don't give a damn. Excuse my language. They do not care about people. And I worked at Human Rights when the Churchill case started, and I remember thinking to myself, how shameful is it that you got to spend almost $750,000 to fight against this poor child that just needs help, to learn in school and have the right, like every other child, to be able to do this. And you're willing to spend that kind of money instead of putting it towards his help.
Understood, and I appreciate the time, Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty, for letting me talk.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
You have a great weekend.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Thank you. Bye-bye. Let's see here. Let's go to line number 6. Good morning, Margarita. You're on the air.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having us.
No problem.
My name's Margarita. Just to give a little introduction to everybody listening, and I'm the founder of the MUN Students First Thrift Store. I'm here with 2 Memorial University students, Blake and Hannah, and they're going to share a little bit about an upcoming event we have this weekend on Saturday and Sunday.
Hey, Patty, how you doing?
Great today. You?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. We're sitting here among tables and tables of clothes. We have about 1,200 students who moved out of residence over the last few weeks, and years and years ago, it would have been all thrown out in the garbage, and this is our 3rd annual yard sale we're having. So we got a bunch of clothing, a bunch of housewares, and shoes. If anyone is around the St. John's area and wants a great deal and divert some nice clothing and stuff from landfills, I think they should definitely come by. It's happening this weekend, so I think Hannah's got some information on where and when.
Hi, so our yard sale will be located in Hatcher Commons at 40 Olivier's Loop in MUN Residence. We're going to be open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday, and all proceeds from this yard sale will go directly to our campus food bank. If you would like to donate or volunteer, or if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us at studentsfirst@gmail.com.
Give people a sense of just how big the demand is at the food bank at MUN.
I guess I can comment on this, yeah. So as you remember, hopefully any listeners remember, a couple of years ago, the food bank actually closed for a week or so, and donations poured in from the community to keep it going, but they're in constant need, and with everything increasing and funds increasing, it's been such a high demand, and we don't want this to be a reason that students are struggling academically. We want to make sure that they're set up for success. So that's why we have built this relationship over the past few years, to make sure that we can continue having the yard sale to support them each year. But some other side note is we will be opening up the thrift store hopefully in a few months on a more permanent basis on campus. So that's really exciting. But yeah, to be able to give back to the community for fundraising for the food bank, but also for the fact that we have so much clothing, so much bedding, gently used items. There's a lot of different types of items for people to come out and look at. And a lot of it, you think about how these students moved in September. So a lot of these are purchases that were made quite recently, and they just can't take it home in their suitcase, because a lot of people, they live in different provinces or countries. They don't have the space. So last year we raised about $3,000 for the food bank. Hopefully this year we have a challenge of trying to double it. So I'm hopeful, our group's hopeful, and yeah, we just want to get the word out.
And I'm glad you got the word out here on the show. Good luck with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. All right, there you go. Opportunity to help support them on Food Bank. Good show today. Big thanks to all hands, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again on Monday morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy weekend. Talk Monday. Bye-bye.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, You know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.